Hello people of YouTube, Rich from PCGamesN here, and Total War 3 Kingdoms is very nearly upon us. As developer Creative Assembly has often said, it's a story defined by its characters, and of those, the one that you've probably heard most about is Lu Bu. Here's how CA crafted their take on this iconic warrior. So Lu Bu, if you didn't know, is the warrior worth 1,000 men and the valued enforcer of the tyrant Dong Zhou. Sort of like Darth Vader to the Emperor, although I see the Emperor as a bit more competent and cunning than Dong Zhou. Anyway, you may have heard of Lu Bu already through the long-running action RPG series Dynasty Warriors, also set in the Three Kingdoms, which offers you the meme-worthy advice not to pursue Lu Bu. Did Creative Assembly discuss these other portrayals when considering their own?
We always knew he had to be sort of exactly what he said on the tin, like he's the warrior worth 1,000 men. He had to be kick-ass, for want of a better word. Yeah, exactly, and do not pursue Lu Bu and that kind. And the idea of fighting him in battle would be daunting to a player, but also not overwhelming. They had to be able to defeat him. He wasn't, because in the romance of the Three Kingdoms, the actual novel, he's essentially unstoppable, if not like a fool. But we had to sort of temper that a little bit and make him not completely like just doom killer.
Yeah, I think the thing we try to do is different portrayals portray him very differently. Like you find like in other portrayals, he is basically evil, right? He is portrayed as this quite evil guy. You know, he kills multiple adopted parents, forms his own nation, steals a city away from Liu Bei. Like you could see that you could portray him as quite a nasty individual, but realistically, we tried to portray someone a lot more. It's more that he's just this amazing warrior. Like you're scared of him not because of his personality, but his prowess. Like his ability in warfare and fighting actually makes you don't. He's a nice thing at the start of the game because it gives you something to kind of look up to a little bit. Like this is where your characters could be by the end of the game. Like you know, your Guan Yu may become the next Lu Bu. Like that's part of it. We wanted. We want you to have someone you could look at and see. This is what a kind of top level maxed out hero would look like. You want to get this as well.
He also has this nice sort of tragic drama to him as well, where you know, with the whole Dio Chan and that he's basically, you know, a bit love-struck and sort of he has a very human side to himself as well. So, yeah, I think he's quite interesting as this chaotic, neutral guy maybe who, yeah, kills adopted fathers and sort of does his own thing, but he has this vulnerable side as well, almost.
It's almost a Shakespearean flaw, isn't it? Like he's undone by his love. So, I mean, related to that, did you feel maybe that other depictions of him sort of sell him a little bit short as, you know, violent, ill-tempered, maybe a little bit stupid, short-sighted because of that flaw to the point of stupidity? And did you, like you looking to bring a little bit more nuance to his depiction?
I think Simon said it best to sort of like humanity, like humanizing him a bit, because the way that he's being depicted in the game, particularly through some of his dialogue and that kind of stuff, is he's hyper aware of his own ability and his own strength. And he says so much as much in battle, but also it does sour into like an arrogance which is short-sighted and which is blinding him to the reality of him, you know, being increasingly hated, which is in the history whether or not he deserves it, but he does betray and abandon. Like he abandons his own wife when he flees Chang'an. Like the man is not particularly known for his loyalty, so it has to be represented whether or not you define it as evil or not. It's a very human, very, very potent flaw.
There's a nice twist on the gameplay side as well. Speaking of loyalty, that you know he's a very valuable tool, but he's actually really hard to keep in line, and he will switch sides during the campaign because it's very hard to keep satisfied, and he has some traits that make that a bit more tricky than with others, and he has a very high rank from the start. So keeping him in line is actually quite challenging if you have him in your faction. So that's a nice angle on it.
Yeah, you can't cage a tiger, can you?
Yeah,
That's the
in
thing
that
with
sense.
him.
Yeah. But you also, you get him into, if you were to get him in your faction, if he left, if his faction has collapsed or something, he immediately gets, and he's like, I'm not in a high enough position, guys. I don't really, and then you give him just a position, he goes, still not a high enough position, guys, and then usually it leads to...
Maybe adopting him is the solution.
Perhaps, yeah. But yes, that didn't work out so well for Dong Zhuo, did it? No.
So in this way, Lu Bu works in concert with Three Kingdoms' overhauled character system. His ambition and his pride now have ways to really manifest in gameplay, bringing new dynamics to Total War as a series.
The thing I think is most rewarding about him is this feeling that he's not a faction leader in the start of our game. He's not this kind of superpower entity on his own. He's kind of behind Dong Zhuo. And it's quite interesting that they're almost like sort of a little bit, but they're also more like a double act. It's not that you fear Dong Zhuo specifically, you fear Lu Bu. And because of that, you fear Dong Zhuo. I liked that kind of psychology that builds for you with it. Like, I found that really cool, because we've not really done that with any of the other factions in our game. There's not that kind of relationship between the characters there.
But I think that feeds into playing a Dong Zhuo campaign as well, because when you start a Dong Zhuo campaign, Lu Bu is deployed to the map with an army, and Dong Zhuo is not. So you got that idea, especially if you know your history or you know where it's going. It's like, if you want Lu Bu to be your faction leader later on, rather than Dong Zhuo, you can see the sort of the seeds of like, oh, well, he's really the power on the board right now. I mean, I can bring Dong Zhuo into it, but Lu Bu is the one running around making all the decisions and killing all the dudes. Maybe he should be the one who's in charge. Or it's sort of from turn zero, essentially, you start to feel that weird power imbalance that is what comes to define, in the romance at least, his ultimate betrayal over Dong Zhuo, which I thought is really neat.
What I like perhaps more from a player's perspective is that he's sort of the wild card on the map. Like in many of my campaigns, or what I've seen from other people, is he always ends up with his own faction somewhere, like trying to forge his own destiny ultimately. You know, he's serving this guy and then sort of he is this almost free radical that jumps across the map and leaves its mark wherever it goes. And I thought that's really cool. Sort of a nice surprising element for each campaign. In that sense.
Every character who fails has this fatal flaw to them. It's a very big part of the narrative, is all the characters who die or lose have a flaw. Lu Bu's is his arrogance, right? His hubris, his pride. He just thinks too much of himself, and he's not willing to bend or shift in order to allow that to happen. It's, one of the reasons why he dies and falls at the end. He refuses to bow. He refuses to give in at any point, because he's like, why should I? I'm the greatest warrior in the world. And I like that concept that everyone does have this flaw. And as I say, his arrogance and his kind of high rank and desire for high positions at the start of the game make him very difficult to control and keep a hold of, which really plays into his kind of more traditional portrayal as a character.
So has that happened to any of you guys in a playthrough that you might have done as Dong Zhuo? Or indeed anyone else that had Lu Bu in the faction?
Well, I mean, yeah, you always have this sort of trouble keeping him in line, and I think we all had situations where, oh cool, Lu Bu's entered my recruitment pool, I can hire him now, and then, oh God, how do I actually keep him?
It's the worst 1,000 I've ever spent. It's such a bad investment.
Yeah, but going back to the beginning as well a little bit, that it was very important for us to make him really feel potent on the battlefield. So if you can keep him in your faction, keep him loyal, and then you are able to field him in battle, that has a huge impact. Like he is, especially in the beginning, he is super strong. That feels really satisfying.
So I mean, in what ways have you conveyed that power on the battlefield? Because the way that the romance is, it essentially describes him and other characters as having basically superpowers. Was it difficult to draw the line at any point and say this is getting like too silly? Or
yeah, I mean, of course, the whole getting the high level idea, it was pretty not straightforward but clear. But then getting the balancing down on the actual numbers, getting that correct, was of course a bit of a challenge, because obviously he has very strong abilities, for example, that enable him to slay a lot of people with a splash attack, but can't be too powerful, right? Because then the game breaks, and so it was certainly a bit of a challenge.
But like Simon was saying, he is like mad powerful at the beginning, and he's sort of an aspirational figure for your characters as they level up. But he's also asymmetrical in a little way, because he should be good at mostly killing, like by his type, troops, like getting into a fight and wading and cutting down hundreds of people. But also, he's also really, really good at dueling, because he is really, really good at dueling, which is something that's slightly asymmetrical with other heroes. Like he's not unbeatable, but he's just really good at like everything, essentially.
We always talked about the Wuxing, as sort of a design lens to categorize characters and technologies and units. But of course, it's always gets really interesting once you get these spots where you combine the elements, like mix or create hybrids, so to speak, where that strict balance is a bit broken, because that makes it really interesting for players to interact with.
It's part of the fun, isn't it? When you've got some rules, breaking them creates some really interesting outcomes after that. Guan Yu. Fairly hard counter. Yeah, I think like generally it's wearing him down. That's what you've got to do with that. Putting your heroes in his way so your units can deal with the rest of the battlefield. So, for example, challenging him to a duel, you're not going to win, right? You're going to lose that duel, but what you're doing is you're distracting him and holding him up. He's not cutting down swathes of your units because he's engaged in that duel. So you can use your units to kind of finish the rest of the battle and then turn your full force onto him, because he's powerful, but he's not invincible. So you can take him down in the end with good strategy.
But particularly at the beginning of the game, you don't want to go. I mean, he's quite far away at the beginning of the game for most people, but literally do not pursue Lu Bu. Is that sort of the beginning of the game? I said it right. Yeah.
Do not pursue Lu Bu.
I was going to ask about that actually, because you guys have shown yourselves as being a studio with a sense of humor in the past, right? Have you ever? Is there maybe an advisor that pops up and says, "Do not pursue Lu Bu"?
Is there a "Do not pursue Lu Bu" thing in the game?
I can't believe you would have missed it.
I mean, it might be quite oblique, but it'll probably be in there somewhere. I cannot confirm or deny that I have done something to that ilk.
You fight like a dairy farmer.
Oh, that was good.
I would never.
Okay, cool. So, turning then to his visual portrayal, one thing that I've noticed is that the length of the feathers has been shortened compared to previous depictions. In fact, I think there's even, I don't know how authentic it is, but there might have even been some period art which shows a picture of Lu Bu with 2 long feathers trailing down to his hips. Why did you guys change direction there?
I think it was just as we went for the art style, without going too in detail because it's not my area, but just to ground it a bit more, I suppose. I mean, it's entirely true that a lot of the depictions have him with these really long feathers, but also the depictions of Liu Bei have him with enormous earlobes that go down to his waist. So, we just kind of sort of pinned it all in a little bit.
Overall, I think we probably have a more realistic or humanized portrayal of all the characters, and a bit more like a realistic frame.
Yeah, you see him in a Dynasty Warriors game, and they're enormous.
Because I think we did take a lot from the historical imagery, as his headdress depicts it is of a similar style and things, and we brought a lot of other elements into him which were historical, like he's got red hair as a horse, he's got his halberd. We kind of tried to stick to the portrayal, but I think as you guys are saying, it's kind of, we tried to sort of bring it in a little bit and sort of try and make it a bit more kind of realism. Like having tassels that long, you'd trip over, I would imagine.
Yeah.
They get tangled at the back of your ear. It's like headphones, you'd have to untangle it.
Minus 15 milli evasion.
Yeah, that's very reasonable.
His abilities do have bespoke.
I'd say his unique abilities will have
his
bespoke.
unique abilities are animations only he will have for him, because they're special. He's the only one who gets those abilities as well. No one else has them in game. So that's kind of where we try and bring across a lot of him as a person at that point on the battlefield with his animations. But generally his kind of pose and character model make him seem a lot more powerful. Like he's got the kind of hero stance, that hero pose, the kind of traditional classic, but
legs apart a little bit.
Legs apart, slightly off to one side. But he has that, and that's the idea, is we want to make him feel strong. The way he holds his spear backwards like that, that's strength, because he's ready to bring it out at any moment. So that's all kind of building into him as a character to make him feel dominant.
Very cool.
On the battlefield.
Yeah. Were there any other points that you needed to hit visually about him? I mean, there's the lion belt and things like this from the source.
His armor was a very important thing for us to get right. Like you'll see in the 2 different modes that his armor is actually different in between, because we looked at the history of it and we saw a lot of depictions of him had him with certain armor types on. So we did that, and then we looked at the history and went, actually, that's not really historically accurate for this period. So we actually changed the armor back down to a different armor style for him in records mode to keep it more.
So what's the difference between the 2? Is it chainmail versus lacquer, I guess?
Yeah, lacquer armor.
Okay, cool.
So that's a nice bit of dedication to historical accuracy. But so much of this period is lost to history. It all happened over 1800 years ago, after all, that CA has had to apply a fair bit of dramatic license in bringing it all to life. So where did the studio land on the most famous claim about Lu Bu's legendary battle prowess?
Would you say he's literally worth 1,000 men then? in terms of like.
I think it's quite possible that he could beat up 1,000 men in a
In
battle.
tests, we've reached high numbers of men killed by Lubu.
Depends on the unit size, perhaps, but yeah.
Yeah, what? Yeah.
Army of peasants, I reckon he could easily get to 1,000.
Right. Oh, very cool. So, nothing literal adherence to the source material.
Yeah, that's his title in game, is Warrior literally worth literally 1,000 men.
Now, we actually tested this after filming this interview. In custom battle, I pitted Lubu against 3 weedy strategists and filled their retinues with weedy saber militia. I can thus confirm that Lubu is in fact not worth 1,000 men. He is worth 2,163 men. That's right, he soloed this battle and won, thanks to lots of cycle charging and spamming his amazing abilities, one of which can immobilize all enemies in a huge area of effect. Probably best avoiding him for most of the game at least when 3 Kingdoms comes out tomorrow. Until then, we hope you found this video interesting, give us a like if you did, and check out the channel for plenty more PC gaming and Total War content, and subscribe for plenty more in the future. Until we see you next time, thanks very much for watching, and take care.